Black child gave up his first-class seat for pregnant woman, then she did this. The gentle hum of the airplane engines provided a soothing backdrop as passengers filed into the cabin of Flight 2187 from Chicago to San Francisco. Among them was 10-year-old Marcus Thompson, dressed in a neat blue button-down shirt, a bow tie with tiny airplanes printed on it, and freshly pressed khaki pants. His mother, Dr. Shanice Thompson, a renowned pediatric surgeon, had purchased first-class tickets for their journey to visit Marcus's grandmother, who had recently undergone hip replacement surgery. Marcus clutched his favorite book about space exploration, excitement gleaming in his eyes. This was only his third time flying, and the first time he would be sitting in first class. The flight attendant smiled warmly as she checked their boarding passes and directed them to their seats. "Mom, look at how big these seats are," Marcus exclaimed, running his small hand over the plush leather armrest of seat 2A by the window. "Yes, honey, that's why I saved up for these tickets. I wanted our journey to be special," Shanice replied, placing their carry-on bags in the overhead compartment before settling into seat 2B beside her son. Marcus couldn't contain his excitement. "Can I have the window seat, Mom, please?" "Of course, sweetie. Just remember to keep your seatbelt fastened when the sign is on," Shanice reminded him with a gentle smile. As they settled in, Marcus peered out of the window, watching the ground crew load luggage onto the plane. The first-class cabin gradually filled with businessmen in expensive suits, a famous actress Marcus recognized from a superhero movie, and a few other well-dressed passengers. Just as the boarding announcement indicated they would be closing the doors soon, a visibly pregnant woman entered the first-class cabin, perspiration beading on her forehead. She appeared to be in her early 30s, with blonde hair pulled back in a messy bun, wearing a floral maternity dress stretched over her very pronounced baby bump. "Excuse me," she said to the flight attendant, slightly out of breath. "I have a seat in coach, but I was wondering if there might be any available upgrades. I'm 8 months pregnant, and my doctor recommended I try to get more legroom for this 5-hour flight." The flight attendant's face fell slightly. "I'm so sorry, ma'am, but first class is completely booked for this flight. We did have one cancellation, but it was filled just moments ago." The pregnant woman nodded, disappointment evident in her eyes. "I understand, thank you anyway." As she turned to make her way back to the economy section, Marcus watched her place a protective hand on her stomach and winced slightly. Without hesitation, Marcus tugged on his mother's sleeve. "Mom," he whispered, "can I give my seat to that lady? She needs it more than me." Shanice looked at her son with surprise, then immense pride warmed her expression. "Are you sure, Marcus? You were so excited about sitting in first class." "I'm sure, Mom. My teacher, Ms. Robinson, says we should always help people who need it. And that lady has a baby in her tummy. She should have a comfortable seat." Shanice's eyes glistened with unshed tears as she nodded. "That's very kind of you, Marcus. Let's tell the flight attendant." Marcus unbuckled his seatbelt and approached the flight attendant who was helping another passenger store a briefcase. "Excuse me, miss," Marcus said politely. "I'd like to give my seat to that pregnant lady. I can sit in her seat instead." The flight attendant looked down at the small boy, momentarily speechless. Then a warm smile spread across her face. "That's incredibly generous of you, young man. Let me see what we can do." Within minutes, arrangements were made. The pregnant woman, who introduced herself as Eliza Pearson, was moved to tears by Marcus's gesture. "You would really do that for me?" she asked, kneeling slightly to meet Marcus at eye level. "Yes, ma'am," Marcus replied with the innocent straightforwardness of a child. "My mom says it's important to be kind to people, and you have a baby, so you should be comfortable." Eliza glanced at Shanice, gratitude written all over her face. "You've raised an extraordinary young man." "Thank you," Shanice replied, placing a proud hand on Marcus's shoulder. "He makes it easy." As Marcus prepared to follow a flight attendant to Eliza's seat in economy, Eliza reached into her handbag and pulled out a business card. "Please," she said, pressing it into Shanice's hand, "I'd like to stay in touch, what your son did. It's not something you see every day." Shanice glanced at the card. "Eliza Pearson, executive producer, Pearson Media Group." She looked up with surprise. "You're in television." Yes, Eliza confirmed with a small smile. Currently working on a new documentary series about everyday heroes. She glanced meaningfully at Marcus. And I think I just met one. Marcus, oblivious to the significance of Eliza's position, was already chatting with the flight attendant about whether he could visit the cockpit after landing. Shanice tucked the card into her purse, not thinking much of it beyond a nice gesture from a grateful stranger. Little did either of them know that this simple act of kindness would set into motion a chain of events that would change their lives forever. Marcus settled into seat 32F in economy class, his enthusiasm undimmed despite the cramped conditions. The middle-aged man in the seat next to him peered over his newspaper with curious eyes. "Aren't you a little young to be sitting alone?" the man asked, folding his paper. "I'm 10, Marcus replied confidently. "And my mom is just up in first class. I gave my seat to a pregnant lady because she needed it more than me." The man's eyebrows shot up. "Is that so? Well, that's mighty kind of you, young man." He extended his hand. "I'm Richard Blackwood." "I'm Marcus Thompson," the boy replied, shaking Richard's hand with the firm grip his grandfather had taught him. "Nice to meet you, sir." "Thompson, as in Dr. Shanice Thompson's son?" Richard asked, surprise evident in his voice. Marcus nodded, eyes wide. "You know my mom." Richard smiled. "Not personally, but I'm on the board at Mercy Hospital. Your mother's reputation precedes her. She's an exceptional surgeon." For the next hour, Marcus and Richard engaged in conversation. Marcus learned that Richard was a philanthropist who funded educational programs for underprivileged youth across Chicago, while Richard was captivated by the boy's intelligence and compassion. "You know, Marcus," Richard said thoughtfully, "what you did today, giving up your comfort for someone in need, that's the kind of character we look for in our scholarship programs. How would you feel about visiting one of our centers sometime?" "That would be cool," Marcus exclaimed. "I love helping kids. At school, I'm a reading buddy for first graders." Richard chuckled. "Of course you are. Here's my card. Have your mother call me if she's interested." As the flight progressed, Shanice found herself deep in conversation with Eliza. Despite her initial concern about being separated from Marcus, the flight attendants had assured her he was doing fine, even bringing back reports of his cheerful adaptation to economy class. "Your son's gesture touched me deeply," Eliza admitted, rubbing her pregnant belly absently, "especially given the week I've had." Shanice raised an eyebrow questioningly, and Eliza continued, "My documentary series on everyday heroes was nearly canceled. The network executives don't believe people care about good news anymore." She sighed. "They want drama, conflict, outrage, not stories about human kindness." "That's unfortunate," Shanice replied. "I think we need more reminders of the good in the world, especially these days." "Exactly." Eliza leaned forward as much as her pregnant belly would allow. "That's why I fought so hard to keep this project alive, and then your son comes along and proves my entire thesis in one spontaneous moment." Eliza's eyes took on a determined gleam. "Would you and Marcus consider being featured in our first episode? His act of kindness is exactly the kind of story I want to tell." Shanice hesitated. "I don't know, Eliza. We're not looking for publicity." "It's not about publicity," Eliza insisted. "It's about inspiration. Think about how many people might be moved to their own acts of kindness after seeing Marcus's story." Before Shanice could respond, the plane encountered turbulence. The seatbelt sign illuminated with a chime, and Shanice's thoughts immediately went to Marcus. Meanwhile, in economy class, Marcus was handling the turbulence with the resilience of youth, even as several adult passengers around him grew visibly nervous. He noticed a little girl across the aisle, no more than 5 years old, clutching her mother's arm in fear. "It's okay," Marcus called over to her. "It's just like bumps in the road when you're in a car." The girl peeked at him with tear-filled eyes. Marcus continued, "I read in my airplane book that turbulence is normal. It's just air moving around like waves in the ocean." Gradually, the little girl's grip on her mother relaxed, and she even managed a small smile at Marcus. Her mother mouthed a grateful thank you across the aisle. Richard, who had been observing this interaction, nodded appreciatively. "You have a natural way with people, Marcus. That's a rare gift." Marcus shrugged. I just don't like seeing people scared or sad. As the turbulence subsided, a flight attendant made her way down the aisle, checking on passengers. When she reached Marcus, she knelt beside his seat. "How are you doing back here, young man?" she asked kindly. "I'm great," Marcus replied enthusiastically. "I made a new friend." He gestured toward Richard. "Indeed you did," Richard confirmed. "This young man has been excellent company." The flight attendant smiled. "Well, I have a message from your mother. She wants to make sure you're comfortable and to let you know she'll come check on you after the seatbelt sign is turned off." "I'm fine," Marcus assured her. "Please tell my mom not to worry." When the flight attendant returned to first class, she reported not only Marcus's well-being, but also the interaction she had witnessed with the frightened little girl. "Your son is quite remarkable," she told Shanice. "He's comforting other passengers now." Eliza, who overheard this, gave Shanice a meaningful look. "You see, that's exactly what I'm talking about, natural goodness that inspires others." Shanice felt a mixture of maternal pride and thoughtful consideration of Eliza's proposal. Perhaps sharing Marcus's story could have a positive impact. She decided to discuss it with Marcus after they landed. The remainder of the flight passed without incident. When they began their descent into San Francisco, Shanice made her way to economy class to check on Marcus. She found him engaged in an animated conversation with Richard, their heads bent over Marcus's space book. Richard was pointing out something on a page about NASA's latest mission. "Hello," Shanice greeted, slightly surprised to find her son so comfortable with a stranger. "I hope my son hasn't been bothering you." Richard stood to greet her, extending his hand. "Dr. Thompson, it's an honor. I'm Richard Blackwood from Mercy Hospital's board. Your son has been delightful company. In fact," he glanced at Marcus with a smile, "we've been discussing the possibility of him visiting one of my educational centers." Recognition dawned on Shanice's face. "Mr. Blackwood, of course. Your work with underprivileged children is widely respected." As they exchanged pleasantries, Shanice couldn't help but marvel at how Marcus's simple act of kindness had already led to such meaningful connections. First Eliza, and now Richard Blackwood. When the plane touched down in San Francisco, Marcus was buzzing with excitement about his adventure in economy class. As they disembarked, Eliza waited for them at the gate. "I wanted to thank you both again," she said, handing Shanice an envelope. "This is a small token of my appreciation, but I hope you'll consider my offer about the documentary." After saying goodbye to Eliza and exchanging contact information with Richard, Shanice and Marcus made their way to baggage claim. "Mom, what did that lady give you?" Marcus asked curiously. Shanice opened the envelope. Inside was a gift certificate for a weekend stay at a luxury resort in Napa Valley, along with a handwritten note expressing Eliza's gratitude. "That was very generous of her," Shanice murmured, touched by the gesture. "What did she mean about a documentary?" Marcus asked, his perceptive ears having caught that part of the conversation. As they waited for their luggage, Shanice explained Eliza's proposal. "She wants to tell the story of what you did today, giving up your seat. She thinks it might inspire other people to be kind, too." Marcus considered this, his young face serious. "Would I be on TV, like in a movie?" "Something like that," Shanice replied. "But we don't have to decide right now, and if you don't want to do it, that's completely fine." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "I think I'd like to help if it makes other people be nicer to each other." Shanice hugged her son, marveling at his innate goodness. "We'll think about it. For now, let's focus on visiting Grandma. She can't wait to see you." As they collected their bags and headed toward the exit, neither of them noticed the woman watching them from a distance, her face set in a cold, calculating expression. She took out her phone and dialed quickly. "I found them," she said tersely. "The Thompson boy and his mother just landed. We should move forward with the plan." Unknown to Marcus and Shanice, their lives were about to become far more complicated than they could have imagined, all because of one simple act of kindness on an airplane. The taxi ride from San Francisco International Airport to Grandma Josephine's house in the peaceful suburb of Millbury took just under 30 minutes. Marcus pressed his face against the window, taking in the sights of the Bay Area with wide-eyed wonder. The last time they had visited his grandmother was 2 years ago, and his memories of the area were fuzzy at best. "Mom, can we go see the Golden Gate Bridge while we're here?" Marcus asked, his mind already racing with possibilities for their 2-week stay. "Of course, honey. We'll have plenty of time for sightseeing after Grandma is feeling a bit stronger," Shanice replied, scrolling through her phone to check emails that had accumulated during their flight. The taxi pulled up to a modest but well-maintained single-story house with a meticulously groomed garden. Colorful flowers lined the walkway, and a wheelchair ramp had been recently installed at the front entrance, a new addition since their last visit. Grandma Josephine was waiting at the door, supported by a walker but beaming with joy at the sight of her daughter and grandson. "There's my favorite people in the whole wide world," she called out, her voice strong despite her physical frailty. "Grandma," Marcus raced up the walkway, remembering at the last moment to gentle his approach instead of launching into his usual bear hug. "Mom said I have to be careful with you because of your new hip." Josephine Thompson, a retired high school principal with silver-streaked hair and the same warm brown eyes as her daughter and grandson, laughed heartily. "Your mother worries too much. Come here and give your grandma a proper hug." As Marcus carefully embraced his grandmother, Shanice paid the taxi driver and collected their luggage. By the time she joined them at the door, Josephine was already asking Marcus about their flight. "And then I gave my seat to a pregnant lady, Grandma," Marcus was explaining proudly. "She was really big with her baby and looked uncomfortable." Josephine's eyes widened. "You gave up your first-class seat? Well, isn't that something?" She looked up at Shanice with a knowing smile. "You're raising him right, Shanice, just like your father and I raised you." Inside, the house was warm and inviting, with the aroma of Josephine's famous peach cobbler wafting from the kitchen. Although she had hired a part-time nurse to help her during recovery, Josephine had insisted on baking her grandson's favorite dessert herself. "Mrs. Thompson, you really shouldn't be on your feet so much," chided a middle-aged woman emerging from the kitchen. She wore scrubs with a name tag that read Darlene. "Darlene, I'd like you to meet my daughter, Dr. Shanice Thompson, and my grandson, Marcus," Josephine said, ignoring the gentle reprimand. "Darlene has been taking good care of me these past few weeks." After exchanging pleasantries, Darlene helped Josephine to her favorite armchair while Shanice and Marcus settled in. Marcus promptly began telling his grandmother all about their flight adventure, embellishing the story with the dramatic flair of a 10-year-old. "And the lady I gave my seat to, she makes TV shows, Grandma. She wants to put me in a show about being kind to people." Josephine raised an eyebrow, looking to Shanice for confirmation. "A television producer? That's quite a coincidence." Shanice nodded, retrieving Eliza's business card from her purse. "Eliza Pearson from Pearson Media Group. She's working on a documentary series about everyday heroes and thinks Marcus would be perfect for their first episode." "Is that so?" Josephine took the card, examining it carefully. "And what do you think about this, Shanice? You've always been so protective of Marcus's privacy." Shanice sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I'm conflicted, Mom. On one hand, I'm wary of putting Marcus in the spotlight. On the other," she glanced at her son, who was now investigating Grandma's collection of African masks on the wall, a tradition from their Ghanaian heritage. "The message is a positive one, and Marcus seems excited about it." "Well," Josephine said thoughtfully, "sometimes the universe puts opportunities in our path for a reason. But take your time deciding. You're here for 2 weeks, after all." Later that evening, after a hearty dinner and 2 slices of peach cobbler, Marcus sat on the porch swing with his grandmother while Shanice made a few work calls. "Grandma, do you think I should be on that lady's TV show?" Marcus asked, his legs swinging back and forth beneath the swing. Josephine considered the question carefully. "What do you think, Marcus? Why would you want to do it?" Marcus's brow furrowed in concentration. "Well, at school, there's this boy, Tyler. He gets bullied sometimes because he has 2 dads. The other kids say mean things. I always stand up for him, but what if more kids saw that being kind is cool? Maybe they'd stop being mean." Josephine's heart swelled with pride. "That's a very thoughtful reason, Marcus. You know, your grandfather, God rest his soul, always said that a single candle can light 1,000 others without diminishing its own flame." What does that mean, Grandma? It means that when you share your light, your kindness and goodness, with others you don't lose anything. Instead, you spread brightness to dark places. Marcus nodded solemnly, processing this wisdom. I think I want to do the show, then, to light candles. Josephine hugged her grandson close, her eyes misty. Your grandpa would be so proud of the young man you're becoming. Inside, unbeknownst to them, Shanice's phone buzzed with an incoming email. The sender, Eliza Pearson. The subject line, urgent please read security concern regarding Marcus. The email would remain unread until morning, but its contents would shatter the peaceful start to their San Francisco visit and plunge them into a situation more complex and dangerous than a simple documentary opportunity. Across town, in a sleek high-rise apartment overlooking the bay, Eliza Pearson sat at her desk, one hand protectively cradling her pregnant belly, the other hovering over her laptop keyboard. She had just sent the email to Shanice and was debating whether to make a more direct phone call. The information she had uncovered in the hours since landing was disturbing, to say the least. What had started as a background check for potential documentary subjects had led her down a rabbit hole of concerning connections. And now, she feared she might have inadvertently put Marcus and his mother in danger simply by showing interest in their story. Matthew, she called to her husband, who was preparing tea in their open-concept kitchen. I think we need to call that private security firm your brother recommended. The urgent tone in her voice made him look up sharply. Is this about the Thompson family? Eliza nodded grimly. I'm afraid it's worse than we thought. Morning broke over San Francisco with a characteristic layer of fog that would burn off by midday. In Grandma Josephine's guest bedroom, Shanice awoke to the sound of her phone buzzing with notifications. She had slept deeply after the exhaustion of travel and the emotional resonance of watching her son's kindness touch so many people. Blinking away sleep, she reached for her phone and saw a series of missed calls and texts from an unknown number, along with an urgent email from Eliza Pearson received the night before. A sense of unease settled in her stomach as she opened the email first. Dear Dr. Thompson, I hope this message finds you and Marcus well after your flight. I must apologize for the urgency and alarming nature of this communication, but matters have come to my attention that I believe may concern your family's safety. During our standard background research process for the documentary, my team uncovered some troubling information. It appears that someone has been monitoring your professional activities for some time, particularly concerning a specific surgery you performed last year on a child named Aaliyah Williams. I wouldn't normally reach out like this, but I've learned that the individual involved may have been on our flight today and may have overheard our conversation. I've hired private security for my family as a precaution and strongly recommend you consider doing the same. Please call me at your earliest convenience at the private number below. Do not respond to this email as I cannot guarantee its security. With concern, Eliza Pearson. Shanice sat up straight, fully alert now. Aaliyah Williams. The name sent a chill down her spine. Aaliyah had been a 7-year-old patient with a rare heart condition, the daughter of Chicago real estate magnate Victor Williams and his wife Cynthia. The surgery had been high risk but successful. However, complications had arisen during recovery, complications that had led to a contentious legal battle when the Williams family accused the hospital of negligence. The case had been settled out of court 6 months ago, with Shanice's name ultimately cleared of any wrongdoing. But Victor Williams had been vocal about his dissatisfaction with the outcome, making thinly veiled threats during the final hearing that Shanice had dismissed as the emotional reaction of a distraught father. Now those threats felt far more ominous. The texts on her phone were from Eliza, asking Shanice to call her secure line as soon as possible. The missed calls were from the same number. Just as Shanice was about to return the call, Marcus appeared in the doorway, already dressed and eager to start the day. Mom, Grandma says she's making blueberry pancakes. Can we go to the Science Museum after breakfast, please? Shanice forced a smile, not wanting to alarm her son. Sure, sweetie, that sounds fun. Why don't you go help Grandma while I get dressed? Once Marcus had bounded off, Shanice quickly dialed Eliza's number, her heart pounding. Shanice, thank goodness, Eliza answered on the first ring. Did you get my email? Yes, just now. Eliza, what's going on? How certain are you about this? Eliza's voice was tense. Certain enough to hire armed guards for my family. My husband's brother works in corporate security. He ran a check on the Williams family after I mentioned your name. Standard procedure for our subjects, honestly. What he found was alarming. Victor Williams has hired a private investigator to track your movements. Shanice felt sick, and you think someone on the flight. The woman in seat 3C, directly behind where I was sitting after Marcus gave me his seat. She took particular interest in our conversation. My security team identified her as Carmen Vasquez, a former intelligence operative now working in the private sector. She's known to be on Williams' payroll. The implications were staggering. Had Marcus's innocent act of kindness inadvertently exposed them to a threat that had been lurking just below the surface? What should I do? We're staying at my mother's house. I can't put her at risk too. My team is already en route to you, Eliza said firmly. They'll establish a security perimeter and brief you on next steps. In the meantime, act normally. Don't alarm Marcus or your mother yet. After hanging up, Shanice dressed quickly, her mind racing. Could this really be happening? Was she overreacting to what might be nothing more than a concerned father keeping tabs on the doctor who had operated on his child? But deep down, she knew Eliza wouldn't have reached out like this without substantial concern. The documentary producer had a reputation for thoroughness and integrity in her work. If she was worried, there was likely good reason. Downstairs, the scene was disarmingly normal. Marcus was setting the table while Grandma Josephine flipped pancakes with the expertise of someone who had been making them for decades. Darlene, the nurse, was organizing Josephine's morning medications. There she is, Josephine called cheerfully. I was beginning to think you were going to sleep until noon, Shanice. Sorry, Mom, just catching up on some work emails, Shanice replied, trying to keep her voice steady. Marcus looked up eagerly. Mom, can we go to the museum after breakfast? Grandma says there's a new space exhibit. Let's see how Grandma is feeling after breakfast, Shanice hedged, not wanting to commit to a public outing until she'd spoken with Eliza's security team. Just then, the doorbell rang. That's strange, Josephine remarked. I'm not expecting anyone this early. Darlene moved toward the door. I'll get it, Mrs. Thompson. No, Shanice said sharply, then modulated her tone at the startled looks from everyone. I mean, I'll get it. It might be a package I was expecting. Heart hammering, Shanice approached the front door and peered through the peephole. Two professional-looking individuals stood on the porch, a man and a woman, both in business casual attire that couldn't quite hide their athletic builds. Dr. Thompson, the woman called through the door. I'm Diana Reeves with Sentinel Security Services. Eliza Pearson sent us. May we speak with you? Shanice opened the door cautiously. Both individuals presented identification badges and business cards. We should speak privately, Diana suggested, her eyes scanning the street behind her in a way that confirmed Shanice's fears. Of course, please come in. As they entered, Marcus looked up curiously from the dining table. Mom, who are these people? Diana smoothly interjected before Shanice could respond. Hi there, you must be Marcus. I'm Diana, a friend of Ms. Pearson's. She told me all about how you gave up your seat on the airplane. That was a very brave and kind thing to do. Marcus beamed at the recognition. Are you going to be in the TV show too? Diana smiled warmly. Not in front of the camera, but I do help Ms. Pearson with her work. Is that your grandmother making pancakes? They smell amazing. While Diana expertly diverted Marcus and Josephine with friendly conversation, her colleague, who introduced himself as Jackson, pulled Shanice aside. Dr. Thompson, we need to discuss security arrangements immediately. We have reason to believe you and your son may be under surveillance. Shanice nodded grimly. Let's talk in the study. In Josephine's small but tidy home office, Jackson laid out the situation with military precision. Based on our intelligence, Victor Williams has been monitoring your activities since the conclusion of the lawsuit. Until yesterday, this surveillance appeared to be passive, tracking your professional engagements, social media, public appearances. However, after your interaction with Eliza Pearson became known to them, there's been a marked escalation. Why? Shanice asked, bewildered. The case is settled. His daughter is doing well. What does he want from me? Jackson's expression was grave. Revenge, quite possibly. Our sources indicate Williams believes your testimony during the proceedings damaged his reputation in Chicago's elite circles. He's a man accustomed to power and control. Being publicly contradicted by a woman, particularly a woman of color, struck a blow to his ego he seems unwilling to forgive. The racial undertone wasn't lost on Shanice. Throughout the legal proceedings, she had maintained her professional composure despite subtle and sometimes not-so-subtle microaggressions from Williams and his legal team. So what now? Do we need to leave San Francisco? Not necessarily, Jackson replied. Our team will establish round-the-clock surveillance of this property. We'll also implement security protocols for any public outings. Ms. Pearson has arranged for all expenses to be covered. I can't accept that, Shanice protested. This isn't her responsibility. She insists. She feels partially responsible for bringing this situation to a head and wants to ensure your family's safety. Jackson hesitated. There's something else you should know. Williams has connections to local media. If he chooses to, he could turn this into a public spectacle, the grieving father seeking justice against the negligent doctor. But that's not what happened. Aaliyah's complications were a known risk of the procedure. The hospital's investigation cleared me completely. Facts aren't always relevant in the court of public opinion, Dr. Thompson, especially when someone with Williams' resources is controlling the narrative. As this sobering reality sank in, Diana appeared at the study door. Dr. Thompson, your mother is asking for you. I think she suspects something is wrong. Shanice sighed. She always could read me like a book. I need to tell her what's going on. Jackson nodded. We'll be discreet around Marcus, but your mother should be fully informed. Back in the kitchen, Marcus was happily devouring blueberry pancakes, regaling Diana with stories about his school science fair project on renewable energy. Josephine, however, was watching Shanice with sharp, concerned eyes. Marcus, honey, Shanice said, forcing cheerfulness into her voice, would you mind showing Diana your space book after breakfast? I bet she'd love to hear about the Mars rover. Sure, Marcus agreed eagerly, always happy to share his passion for astronomy. Once Marcus and Diana had moved to the living room, Shanice sat beside her mother and quietly explained the situation, with Jackson filling in details as needed. Josephine listened without interruption, her expression growing increasingly stern. When they finished, she straightened her shoulders with the same determination Shanice had witnessed countless times throughout her childhood. Victor Williams thinks he can intimidate my family. In my day, we stood up to men like him. We didn't back down, and we won't start now. She turned to Jackson. You tell Ms. Pearson we appreciate her help, but this is now a family matter. My late husband didn't march with Dr. King for his daughter and grandson to live in fear. Shanice squeezed her mother's hand, drawing strength from Josephine's unwavering resolve. Mom's right. We won't hide, but we will be smart about this. What do you recommend, Jackson? For the next hour, they formulated a plan. Security would be present but unobtrusive. The planned trip to the Science Museum would proceed with added precautions. Most importantly, they would reach out to Shanice's attorney to prepare for any potential media allegations Williams might make. As they finalized the details, Marcus bounded back into the kitchen, Diana following with an impressed expression. Your son is extraordinarily knowledgeable about space exploration, Dr. Thompson, she remarked. He was just explaining the Perseverance rover's sample collection system to me in remarkable detail. Marcus beamed at the praise. Mom, can Diana come to the museum with us? She's never seen the Mars exhibit. The adults exchanged glances, Diana giving a subtle nod of confirmation that this aligned with their security plan. That sounds wonderful, Marcus, Shanice agreed, amazed at her son's ability to bond so quickly with a security professional who had entered their lives under such stressful circumstances. As they prepared to leave for the museum, Shanice's phone buzzed with a text from Eliza. Be careful. Williams just flew into SFO this morning. The threat that had seemed abstract was now very real and very close. Shanice glanced at Marcus. innocently excited about their museum adventure, and felt a fierce surge of protective love. She would not allow Victor Williams to taint her son's experience or threaten his safety. With renewed determination, she texted back, "We're ready for him." Hey everyone, if you're enjoying this story, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Your support means the world to me and helps me continue creating content like this. Now, back to our story. The California Academy of Sciences was bustling with visitors when Shanice, Marcus, and their inconspicuous security detail arrived. Diana had changed into casual clothing to blend in as a family friend, while Jackson and 2 additional team members positioned themselves strategically throughout the museum. Marcus was in his element, darting from exhibit to exhibit with boundless enthusiasm. The planetarium show on Mars exploration had him practically bouncing in his seat, and the docent at the space exhibit was impressed by his insightful questions. "Your son has a bright future in astronomy," the docent commented to Shanice as Marcus examined a scaled model of the solar system. "Thank you," Shanice replied with a proud smile. "He's always been fascinated by space." As they moved through the exhibits, Shanice maintained vigilant awareness of their surroundings while trying to appear relaxed for Marcus's sake. Diana stayed close, her casual demeanor belying her constant scanning of the crowds. During a brief moment when Marcus was absorbed in an interactive display about gravitational fields, Diana leaned closer to Shanice. "We've identified 2 individuals who appear to be monitoring you," she murmured, her eyes fixed ahead as if commenting on the exhibit. "A man near the aquarium entrance and a woman by the gift shop. They're maintaining distance but definitely tracking your movements." Shanice's heart raced, but she kept her expression neutral. "What do we do?" "Exactly what we're doing now. Enjoy the museum. We have them under observation, and Jackson has engaged additional support. We'll modify our exit strategy, but for now, let Marcus have his fun." Hearing her son's name centered Shanice. Yes, this was about protecting Marcus, not just his physical safety, but also his right to a joyful childhood free from adult concerns and fears. "Mom, look," Marcus called excitedly, waving her over to a virtual reality station where visitors could experience a simulated spacewalk. "Can I try it, please?" "Of course, honey." As Marcus donned the VR headset, a familiar face appeared in Shanice's peripheral vision. Her blood ran cold. Victor Williams, immaculately dressed in a tailored suit despite the casual museum setting, was standing 50 feet away, watching them with undisguised interest. Beside him stood a slim woman whom Shanice recognized as Carmen Vasquez from Eliza's description, the woman who had been on their flight. Diana had noticed them too. Her posture shifted subtly and she touched a concealed earpiece. "Subjects identified at 2 o'clock. Maintain positions." Williams made no move to approach them, but his unwavering stare sent a clear message. "I found you." Shanice moved closer to Marcus, positioning herself between her son and Williams's line of sight. Diana casually stepped to block the view further, pretending to take photos of the exhibit. "How long for the VR experience?" Diana asked the attendant, her tone light but insistent. "About 5 minutes," the young man replied. "Perfect, we'll wait right here." Those 5 minutes felt like an eternity to Shanice. When Marcus finally removed the headset, face glowing with excitement, Diana smoothly guided them toward the rainforest dome, in the opposite direction from where Williams had been standing. "That was awesome," Marcus exclaimed. "It felt like I was really floating in space." "I'm glad you enjoyed it, sweetie," Shanice replied, forcing enthusiasm into her voice. "The rainforest exhibit is supposed to be amazing too." Inside the dome, the humid air and dense vegetation provided better cover. Jackson met them at a quieter observation area, his expression tense. "We need to leave," he said quietly. "There are more of Williams's people than we anticipated. We've arranged transportation from the service entrance." "But we haven't seen the penguin feeding yet," Marcus protested, overhearing the last part. "You promised, Mom." The disappointment in his voice broke Shanice's heart. Diana knelt to Marcus's level, her expression gentle but serious. Marcus, remember how in space missions, sometimes astronauts have to change their plans because of unexpected conditions? Marcus nodded solemnly. Well, right now we need to adjust our mission parameters, but I promise we'll make it up to you. In fact, she glanced at Shanice for approval, what if we arrange a private tour of the penguin habitat another day, behind the scenes where regular visitors don't get to go? Marcus's eyes widened. Really, we could do that? Absolutely, Diana confirmed. Ms. Pearson has connections everywhere, including this museum, but for now we need to follow our new flight plan. Can you help us with that? Framing it as a mission rather than a disappointment worked brilliantly. Marcus immediately straightened his shoulders, nodding with newfound purpose. What's our extraction route, Commander Diana? Diana's lips twitched with suppressed amusement at the title. Through the tropical plants, past the butterfly chamber and down the staff corridor. We'll rendezvous with our transport at Point Echo. Copy that, Commander, Marcus replied seriously, completely engaged in what he perceived as an exciting adventure rather than a security concern. As they made their way through the rainforest exhibit, Shanice marveled at Diana's approach. By turning a potentially frightening situation into a game, she had not only secured Marcus's cooperation, but also protected him from unnecessary fear. They exited through a service door marked Staff Only, where a museum security guard was waiting to escort them down a back hallway. Outside, a nondescript van with tinted windows was idling. That's our ride, Jackson confirmed, opening the side door. As they settled inside, Shanice finally allowed herself to exhale. The driver, another member of the security team, pulled away from the curb smoothly. Did we just run away from the bad guys, Mom? Marcus asked, his perceptiveness sometimes surprising for a 10-year-old. Shanice hesitated, unsure how to respond without frightening him. Diana intervened smoothly. We executed a tactical retreat, which is different from running away. In space missions and security operations alike, sometimes the smart move is to regroup and assess. Marcus seemed to accept this explanation. Like when the Apollo 13 astronauts had to change their mission from landing on the moon to getting back home safely. Exactly like that, Diana confirmed. And they were heroes for making that tough decision, right? Right, Marcus agreed, his concerns seemingly alleviated by the comparison. The van took an indirect route back to Josephine's house, making several turns and detours to ensure they weren't being followed. When they finally arrived, Grandma Josephine was waiting anxiously at the door, Darlene hovering protectively beside her. Thank goodness, Josephine sighed as they entered. I've been watching the security cameras these nice folks installed all morning. Did everything go smoothly? Before anyone could answer, Marcus launched into an enthusiastic account of their mission at the museum, complete with the promise of a future private penguin tour. While Marcus regaled his grandmother with their adventure, Shanice pulled Jackson aside. He was there watching us. This is real. Jackson nodded grimly. Very real. We've identified at least 4 operatives working for Williams at the museum, possibly more. They're well-funded and professional. He hesitated. Dr. Thompson, I need to be direct. Williams is escalating faster than we anticipated. This isn't just surveillance anymore. He wanted you to see him today, to know he can get close to you and Marcus. The implication sent ice through Shanice's veins. What's our next move? We're securing the perimeter here, but this location is now compromised. Ms. Pearson has offered her family's vacation property in Napa as a safer alternative. It's gated, remote, and already equipped with security systems. I can't just uproot my mother during her recovery, Shanice protested. Actually, came Josephine's voice from behind them, a wine country vacation sounds lovely. She had wheeled herself over, using the temporary wheelchair she sometimes relied on when her hip was bothering her. Marcus is washing up for lunch so we can speak freely. What's the situation? Jackson quickly outlined their concerns and Eliza's offer. Josephine nodded decisively. That settles it. We'll go to Napa. Darling can come with us to continue my physical therapy. I'll not have some entitled businessman terrorizing my family because his ego was bruised. She fixed Jackson with a stern look. But I want to be clear about something. We are not running away. We are strategically repositioning while we prepare to fight back. Mom's right, Shanice agreed, drawing strength from her mother's resolve. If Williams wants to make this public, then perhaps we should beat him to it. Eliza's documentary could be an opportunity to tell our side of the story. That's a bold move, Jackson acknowledged, but potentially effective. We should discuss it with Ms. Pearson. As if on cue, Shanice's phone rang with Eliza's name on the caller ID. Shanice, Eliza's voice was urgent when she answered. I just received a concerning call from a Chicago Tribune reporter asking for comment on a story about you. They're running a piece tomorrow alleging inappropriate care in the Williams case, claiming to have new evidence. Williams is moving faster than we expected. He can't possibly have new evidence, Shanice said firmly. There isn't any. Truth has never been a prerequisite for a smear campaign, Eliza replied grimly. Listen, my offer stands for the Napa property. My security team says your current location is too exposed. We were just discussing that. We'll take you up on it, thank you. Shanice paused. Eliza, I've been thinking about your documentary offer. If Williams is going to try to control the narrative, perhaps we should present our own. There was a moment of silence on the line. Are you sure? Once we go public with your story, there's no turning back. I'm sure, Shanice confirmed, looking at her mother, who nodded in support. Not just because of Williams, but because what Marcus did, his kindness and generosity, deserves to be shared. Now more than ever, we need stories like his. I couldn't agree more, Eliza said, her voice warming. All right then, let's get you to Napa safely first and then we'll start filming. I'll send over the preliminary contracts for your review. After ending the call, Shanice filled her mother and Jackson in on the conversation. It's settled then, Josephine declared. We leave for Napa and we tell our story our way. Jackson immediately began coordinating with his team for the relocation, while Shanice went to find Marcus. He was in the kitchen, helping Darlene prepare sandwiches for lunch. Hey Mom, I'm making your favorite turkey with avocado, he announced proudly. That looks delicious, honey, Shanice replied, her heart full of love for this extraordinary child. Listen, how would you feel about a change of plans? Instead of staying at Grandma's house, we might go stay at a big house in Napa Valley for a while. There's a swimming pool and lots of space to explore. Marcus's eyes lit up. Cool, can Commander Diana and her team come too? They're awesome. Yes, they'll be coming with us, Shanice confirmed, relieved at his enthusiasm. And guess what? Ms. Pearson, the TV producer from the plane, might come visit us there to talk more about that documentary. The one about being kind to people, about giving up my seat. That's right. How would you feel about telling that story on camera? About why you decided to help Ms. Pearson on the plane? Marcus considered this seriously. I think it's a good idea. Maybe if kids see it, they'll be nicer to each other at school. Like Tyler with his two dads, maybe the mean kids would stop being mean if they saw our show. Once again, Shanice was struck by her son's natural empathy and wisdom beyond his years. That's exactly why Ms. Pearson wants to make this show, sweetie, to help people be kinder to each other. Then I definitely want to do it, Marcus declared with the certainty only a child could possess. As they sat down to lunch, Shanice observed her unusual family gathering. Her strong-willed mother, her compassionate son, the dedicated nurse, and the security professionals who had so quickly become essential to their safety. Despite the stress and uncertainty surrounding them, there was love and determination at this table. Victor Williams might have money and power, but the Thompsons had something far more valuable: truth, integrity, and each other. With Eliza Pearson's help, they would share Marcus's simple act of kindness with the world, demonstrating that even the smallest gesture of compassion could create ripples of change. What Williams didn't realize was that in targeting Shanice and Marcus, he had inadvertently set in motion events that would not only clear Shanice's name once, and for all but also inspire countless others through the story of a 10-year-old boy who gave up his first-class seat to a pregnant woman, and changed more lives than he could possibly imagine. The journey to Eliza Pearson's Napa Valley estate felt like entering another world. After winding through miles of vineyard-lined roads, their small convoy of vehicles passed through an imposing security gate and up a long driveway flanked by towering cypress trees. Marcus pressed his face against the window, wide-eyed with wonder. Whoa, it looks like a castle. The Mediterranean-style villa was indeed impressive, with its terracotta roof, stone walls, and sweeping views of the surrounding vineyards. Eliza herself was waiting on the front steps, her husband Matthew by her side. "Welcome, everyone," she called as they pulled up. "I'm so glad you made it safely." Introductions were made as luggage was unloaded and brought inside. Josephine was particularly impressed with the property's accessibility features: wide doorways, an elevator between floors, and zero-threshold entries had been installed during a recent renovation. "My mother lived with us during her later years," Matthew explained as he showed Josephine to her ground-floor suite. "We wanted her to maintain her independence as much as possible." "Very thoughtful," Josephine approved. "Most people don't consider these things until they need them." Meanwhile, Marcus was excitedly exploring the backyard with its infinity pool overlooking the vineyards. Diana had accompanied him, maintaining her security role while entertaining his endless questions about the property. In the villa's study, Shanice, Eliza, and Jackson gathered to discuss next steps. Eliza had brought printouts of the Chicago Tribune article set to run the following morning. "My contact at the paper shared this with me," she explained, spreading the pages on the desk. "They're at least attempting to present both sides, but the allegations are concerning." Shanice scanned the article, her expression darkening. The piece cited an anonymous hospital source, claiming that Shanice had made a critical error during Aaliyah Williams's surgery, one that wasn't documented in official records. It further alleged that the hospital had covered up this mistake to protect Shanice's rising career and reputation. "This is blatantly false," Shanice said firmly. "Every aspect of that surgery was documented by multiple team members and monitored by the chief of pediatric cardiology. The allegations may be false, but they're specific enough to raise doubts," Jackson pointed out. "That's Williams's strategy, plant seeds of doubt about your professional competence." Eliza nodded grimly. "And racial undertones are woven throughout. Notice the quote from the anonymous colleague, suggesting you received preferential treatment because of diversity initiatives at the hospital." Shanice felt a familiar weight settle in her chest, the same weight she'd carried throughout medical school, residency, and her early career. Despite graduating top of her class at Johns Hopkins and publishing groundbreaking research in pediatric surgical techniques, there were always those who attributed her success to anything but her own merit and hard work. "We need to respond immediately and forcefully," Eliza continued. "I've prepared a statement condemning these false allegations and announcing our documentary project. We'll highlight Marcus's act of kindness as emblematic of your family's character, directly contradicting Williams's narrative." "Is it fair to put Marcus in the spotlight like this?" Shanice questioned, her maternal instincts flaring protectively. "We'll be extremely careful about his involvement," Eliza assured her. "The documentary will focus on the positive impact of his actions, not the controversy with Williams. But the timing of the announcement serves a strategic purpose. It establishes a different narrative before Williams's allegations gain traction." After further discussion, Shanice agreed to the approach. They drafted a joint statement from Shanice and Pearson Media Group, announcing the documentary series on everyday heroes, with Marcus's airplane gesture as the inaugural story. As they worked, Matthew appeared at the study door. "Dinner will be ready soon. Also, I thought you might want to see this. Marcus and Diana have made quite the impression on our staff." He held up his phone, showing a video of Marcus in the kitchen, earnestly teaching Diana and the villa's chef how to make his famous chocolate chip pancakes, a family recipe passed down from Grandma Josephine. "I used to make these with my grandpa before he went to heaven," Marcus was explaining in the video. "He said the secret is to add a little bit of cinnamon to the batter. It makes the chocolate taste more chocolatey." Shanice felt tears welling in her eyes at the mention of her late father. Despite everything happening around them, Marcus remained so beautifully himself, kind, open-hearted, and ever willing to share his joy with others. "Your son is extraordinary," Eliza said quietly. "The world needs more Marcuses." "Indeed it does," Shanice agreed, wiping away a tear. "Let's make sure we protect him while sharing his story." During dinner on the villa's terrace, with the sunset painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks over the vineyards, an almost normal family atmosphere prevailed. Marcus regaled everyone with facts about Mars, while Josephine shared stories of her years as a school principal. Eliza's husband Matthew, a former documentary filmmaker himself before transitioning to vineyard management, engaged Marcus in a discussion about space photography. Have you ever thought about becoming an astrophotographer, Marcus? Capturing images of stars and planets? Marcus's eyes widened. That's a real job, taking pictures of space. Absolutely, Matthew confirmed. Some of the most important discoveries in astronomy came from studying photographs of the night sky. Mom, can we get a telescope? Marcus immediately asked, turning to Shanice with pleading eyes. We'll see, honey, Shanice laughed, grateful for this moment of normalcy amid their extraordinary circumstances. After dinner, while Marcus and Josephine were playing a board game in the living room under Diana's watchful eye, Eliza pulled Shanice aside. There's something I haven't told you, she admitted, leading Shanice back to the study. Something I discovered during our background research that might explain Williams's vendetta against you. Once the door was closed, Eliza continued. Victor Williams's first wife, Amara, was Nigerian. They divorced when Aaliyah was just 2 years old. The custody battle was brutal, and Williams used his wealth and connections to essentially erase Amara from their daughter's life. Shanice frowned. What does this have to do with me? Amara was a doctor, a cardiologist like yourself. Williams systematically destroyed her career with similar tactics to what he's attempting with you. False allegations, media smears, professional isolation. Eliza paused. Based on our sources, when Williams saw you, a successful black female doctor caring for his daughter, it triggered something in him. Possibly guilt, possibly anger that Amara's replacement in Aaliyah's life was someone who resembled her mother. The revelation landed like a blow. So this isn't really about the surgery at all. The surgery complications provided a convenient excuse, but no. Our team believes this is deeply personal for Williams. You represent something he's tried to erase from his and Aaliyah's life, a successful black woman in medicine. Shanice sat heavily in a nearby chair, processing this information. Does Aaliyah know about her birth mother? According to our sources, no. Cynthia Williams, Victor's second wife, adopted Aaliyah when she was 4. All mentions of Amara have been systematically removed from their lives. That's heartbreaking, Shanice murmured. What happened to Amara? She returned to Nigeria after losing custody. She died in a car accident 3 years ago. Eliza's expression was somber. Williams didn't even allow Aaliyah to attend the funeral. The pieces were falling into place. Throughout Aaliyah's treatment, Williams had been unusually hostile toward Shanice, often requesting second opinions from other surgeons, invariably white male doctors. At the time, Shanice had attributed his behavior to the stress of having a critically ill child. Now, a more disturbing pattern emerged. This changes things, Shanice said quietly. If we go public with this connection, we'd be exposing a vulnerable child to a painful family history, Eliza finished. Which is why I'm hesitant to use this information, even to defend you. Shanice nodded in agreement. Aaliyah has been through enough already. We need another approach. They rejoined the others in the living room, where Marcus was teaching Matthew the finer points of his favorite board game while Josephine cheered him on. The scene of domestic tranquility strengthened Shanice's resolve. They would fight Williams's allegations, but not at the expense of another child's well-being. Later that night, after Marcus had been tucked into bed in the room adjoining Shanice's suite, she sat on the terrace with a glass of wine, contemplating everything she had learned. The night was clear, stars twinkling above the dark silhouettes of surrounding mountains. Security personnel patrolled the property perimeter, their presence a reminder of the threat hanging over them. The sliding door opened behind her, and Josephine wheeled herself onto the terrace. Mind if I join you? Of course not, Mom. Can't sleep. At my age, sleep becomes more of a suggestion than a requirement, Josephine quipped, positioning her wheelchair beside Shanice's lounge chair. Beautiful night. It is, Shanice agreed, offering her mother a glass of wine, which Josephine accepted gratefully. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, gazing at the stars. Finally, Josephine spoke. You know, when your father and I were fighting for educational equality in Chicago's South Side schools in the 70s, we faced men like Victor Williams. Men who believed their money and privilege put them above accountability. "What did you do?" Shanice asked, though she had heard variations of these stories throughout her childhood. "We stood our ground, we organized, we built coalitions." Josephine sipped her wine thoughtfully. "But most importantly, we refused to fight on their terms. They wanted anger, confrontation, scenes they could misrepresent to the media. We gave them dignity, solidarity, and unwavering truth instead." "That's harder to do in the age of social media and 24-hour news cycles," Shanice pointed out. "The platforms change, but human nature doesn't," Josephine countered. "Williams wants you to appear defensive, desperate, angry. He's trying to provoke a reaction that confirms the narrative he's crafting about you." Shanice nodded slowly. "So instead we show the world who we really are through Marcus's story." "Exactly. That boy's heart is pure gold, Shanice. His kindness isn't an act or a calculation, it's who he is at his core. And he learned that from you." Josephine reached over to squeeze her daughter's hand. "No smear campaign can stand against authentic goodness witnessed and shared." As Shanice absorbed her mother's wisdom, her phone buzzed with an incoming message. It was from an unknown number, but the content made her blood run cold. "Do you really think hiding in wine country will protect your son? I know about his peanut allergy. One mistake with his food could be tragic. Withdraw your statement to the Tribune and admit negligence in my daughter's case, or you'll regret it. VW." Shanice's hand trembled as she showed the message to her mother. "He's threatening a child now?" Josephine's voice was low with controlled fury. "This ends tomorrow." "What do you mean?" "I mean we stop playing defense." Josephine's eyes flashed with determination. "Williams thinks he has all the power. It's time to show him that he's gravely mistaken." The next morning, the villa buzzed with activity. Shanice had shown Williams's threatening text to Jackson and Eliza, triggering enhanced security protocols and a call to legal authorities. While Marcus enjoyed swimming lessons with Diana, both for fun and as a security measure to keep him supervised at all times, the adults gathered in the villa's conference room. "The message constitutes a clear threat," confirmed Eliza's personal attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Vanessa Chen who had arrived that morning. "We've filed reports with both local and Chicago authorities. Additionally, I've prepared a restraining order request." "Will that stop him?" Shanice asked skeptically. "Not by itself," Vanessa admitted, "but it creates an official record of his threats. That's important for what comes next." Josephine, who had been quietly observing until now, spoke up. "I made some calls this morning to old friends and colleagues." All eyes turned to her with interest. "Esteban Rodriguez, chairman of the Chicago Board of Education, was my vice principal for 15 years. Anthony Jeffries at the Urban League was your father's best friend, Shanice. Margaret Wu at National Medical Association mentored you during residency." Josephine's voice was calm but carried unmistakable authority. "These people, and dozens more, have agreed to stand with us publicly." "Stand with us how exactly?" Shanice asked. Josephine smiled. "By telling their own stories of the Thompson family's character and contributions, by providing counter-narratives to Williams's allegations, by demonstrating that when you attack one member of our community, you take on all of us." Eliza looked impressed. "You've mobilized a support network in less than 12 hours. "I was organizing communities before cell phones existed, dear," Josephine replied with a wry smile. "Some skills never fade." The strategy came together quickly after that. Josephine's network would provide a foundation of character witnesses and public support. Eliza's media connections would ensure balanced coverage. Vanessa's legal team would pursue formal action against Williams for his threats. And at the center of it, all would be Marcus's story, not just of giving up his airplane seat, but of the values that motivated him, values that had been instilled through generations of the Thompson family. Production on the documentary began that afternoon in the villa's sunlit living room. Eliza personally conducted the first interview with Marcus, keeping the questions light and appropriate for his age. "Marcus, can you tell me why you decided to give up your first-class seat on the airplane?" Eliza asked, her voice gentle. Marcus, dressed in a fresh button-down shirt and looking slightly nervous but earnest, replied, "Well, the lady, you looked really tired and had a baby in your tummy. My teacher, Ms. Robinson, says we should always help people who need it more than we do. It seemed like the right thing to do. Were you disappointed to move to economy class? Marcus considered this. A little bit at first, but then I met Mr. Richard and he told me about how he helps kids in Chicago and it was really interesting. So actually it worked out better because I made a new friend. Throughout the interview, Marcus's natural sincerity shone through. There was no rehearsed quality to his responses, just the unfiltered kindness and wisdom of a child raised with strong values. Next, Eliza interviewed Shanice about her career in pediatric surgery and the values she hoped to instill in her son. Marcus sees the world with such compassion, Shanice explained, emotion evident in her voice. When he observes someone in need, his first instinct is always, "How can I help?" That's not something I can take credit for teaching him. It's simply who he is. My job as his mother is to nurture that natural empathy and show him how to channel it effectively. When asked about the Williams case and the recent allegations, Shanice responded with dignified restraint. Every surgeon knows that despite our best efforts, complications can arise. In Aaliyah Williams's case, our team provided the highest standard of care throughout her treatment. The hospital's internal review confirmed this, as did independent medical assessments during the legal proceedings. She continued, "What saddens me most is that this renewed controversy detracts from the well-being of the patient, a wonderful young girl who has shown remarkable resilience. My only concern has always been her health and recovery." By declining to attack Williams personally or appear defensive, Shanice projected the confident authority of a physician secure in her professional integrity. The final interview of the day was with Josephine, whose natural storytelling abilities and lifetime of wisdom created compelling television. She shared stories of Shanice as a determined young girl who performed surgery on her dolls, of the family's legacy of educational activism in Chicago, and of her pride in her grandson's natural empathy. "There's a direct line from the civil rights movement my husband, and I participated into my grandson giving up his seat on that airplane," Josephine explained. "We marched so that future generations would have the freedom and security to exercise compassion without fear. When Marcus offered his seat, he was honoring not just his parents' teachings, but a long tradition of seeing beyond yourself to others' needs." As filming wrapped for the day, Eliza was visibly moved. "This is powerful stuff," she told Shanice. "Authentic, heartfelt, and impossible to dismiss as mere PR." Later that evening, Eliza's team began editing the first segments while monitoring the media response to the Chicago Tribune article. As they had anticipated, Williams's allegations had gained traction in certain circles, but the counter-narrative was already building strength. Former patients of Shanice's had begun sharing positive stories on social media. Medical colleagues issued statements supporting her professional reputation. And Josephine's network had mobilized impressively, with prominent community leaders in Chicago speaking out about the Thompson family's character and contributions. Just before dinner, a surprising email arrived from Richard Blackwood. The philanthropist Marcus had met in economy class on their flight. "I've been following the concerning reports about Dr. Thompson," he wrote. "Having met her remarkable son Marcus and observed his character firsthand, I find these allegations difficult to reconcile with the family values clearly evident in their actions. As such, the Blackwood Foundation is establishing a new scholarship in Marcus Thompson's name, dedicated to supporting underprivileged youth with demonstrated commitment to community service. Sometimes, the smallest gestures of kindness reveal the largest truths about character." The email concluded with a formal statement. The Blackwood Foundation would be releasing to media outlets the following morning. "Richard Blackwood," Jackson murmured, impressed. "His foundation has significant influence in Chicago's business and philanthropic circles. This is a major vote of confidence." "And it all stems from Marcus being kind on an airplane," Eliza marveled. "Your son's simple act continues to create ripples." As Marcus joined them for dinner, blissfully unaware of the latest developments, and chatting excitedly about the baby frogs he discovered near the villa's decorative pond, Shanice felt a complex mixture of emotions: pride in her son, gratitude for their growing circle of support, and determination to protect him from the ugliness of Williams's vendetta. The narrative was shifting, but Williams still posed a real threat, as his message had made chillingly clear. Their security remained tight, with team members taste-testing all food before it reached Marcus, a precaution against his peanut allergy being exploited. That night, after checking the locks 3 times and ensuring the security system was fully engaged, Shanice finally crawled into bed, physically and emotionally exhausted. Tomorrow would bring more filming, more media responses to navigate, and undoubtedly more challenges from Williams. But as she drifted toward sleep, Shanice held onto the image of Marcus giving up his airplane seat with unhesitating generosity, a simple act that had set in motion this extraordinary chain of events. Whatever Williams might throw at them next, that moment of pure kindness could never be tarnished. As dawn broke over the vineyard the next morning, Shanice was awakened by an urgent knock at her door. It was Jackson, his expression grave. "Dr. Thompson, I need you to come downstairs immediately. There's been a development." Heart racing, Shanice threw on a robe and followed him to the villa's security office. Eliza was already there, still in pajamas, her pregnant belly even more pronounced in the unflattering fluorescent lighting. "What's happened?" Shanice demanded, fear making her voice sharp. "Victor Williams appeared on GMA this morning," Eliza explained, gesturing to a monitor displaying a recording of the interview. "He's escalated his tactics significantly." On screen, Williams sat across from the morning show host, the picture of a grieving father. Expensively dressed in a somber suit, he dabbed at his eyes with a handkerchief as he described his daughter Aaliyah's unnecessary suffering following surgery. "We trusted Dr. Thompson with our little girl's life," he said, voice breaking for effect. "And that trust was betrayed through negligence that the hospital then covered up. Now, instead of taking responsibility, she's hiding behind her own child, using him in a publicity stunt documentary to distract from her professional failures." The host pushed back slightly. "Dr. Thompson's representatives have categorically denied these allegations, Mr. Williams. The hospital review cleared her of any wrongdoing." Williams leaned forward intently. "Of course they did. Major hospitals protect their star surgeons, especially when those surgeons check certain diversity boxes." He paused meaningfully. "But I have evidence that wasn't presented during those reviews, evidence I'm prepared to share with appropriate investigators." "This is slander," Shanice whispered, fury building inside her. "He knows there's no evidence because there was no negligence." "It gets worse," Jackson said grimly, fast-forwarding to later in the interview. Williams was now showing photos of Marcus and Shanice at the Science Museum, clearly taken by his surveillance team. "While my daughter continues to suffer from complications, Dr. Thompson parades around San Francisco with her son, using him as a shield against accountability. Now she's hiding at a luxury vineyard owned by a media executive planning to profit from this so-called feel-good story. He's trying to make it seem like we're living in luxury while evading responsibility," Eliza fumed. "And he's directly dragging Marcus into it now." Shanice felt ill. "Has Marcus seen this, or my mother?" "No," Jackson assured her. "We intercepted this before the morning news cycle would reach them, but it's trending on social media already." Vanessa Chen, the attorney, joined them via video call, already briefed on the situation. "This crosses multiple legal lines," she confirmed. "He's made demonstrably false statements, implied racial bias motivations without evidence, and published surveillance photos of a minor without consent. We can file for emergency injunctive relief today." "And in the meantime?" Shanice asked. Eliza and Jackson exchanged glances. "We think it's time to change tactics," Eliza said carefully. "Until now, we've been measured and dignified in our response, but Williams is counting on us to maintain that high road while he fights dirty." "What are you suggesting?" "A direct, immediate response, not angry or defensive, but forthright and proactive." Eliza pulled up a document on her tablet. "We've drafted a statement addressing each of Williams's claims point by point, including highlighting his threatening text to you about Marcus's allergy. And I've prepared media talking points specifically addressing the racial undertones of his attack," added Vanessa. "His comment about diversity boxes was a dog whistle that we shouldn't let stand unchallenged." Shanice reviewed the proposed statements, recognizing their strength but feeling uncomfortable with escalating the public battle. I don't want Marcus exposed to more of this than necessary. Understood, Eliza said gently. But Williams has already brought Marcus into it. The question now is whether we allow him to control how your son is portrayed in this narrative. After further discussion and some revisions to soften the most confrontational language, Shanice approved the response. Within an hour, statements were issued to all major news outlets, and Vanessa filed for emergency legal intervention regarding Williams's use of surveillance photos of a minor. As preparations continued for another day of documentary filming, Shanice braced herself for the difficult conversation she needed to have with Marcus. How do you explain to a 10-year-old that his simple act of kindness had somehow triggered such adult complexity and conflict? She found him in the kitchen with Matthew, enthusiastically helping to prepare breakfast. Marcus was carefully arranging berries on top of a stack of pancakes, his tongue poking out slightly in concentration. "Mom," he called cheerfully when he saw her. "Mr. Matthew showed me how to make bananas Foster pancakes. There's caramel sauce and everything." "That looks delicious, honey," Shanice replied, forcing warmth into her voice despite her inner turmoil. "Marcus, after breakfast, I need to talk to you about something important, okay?" Marcus nodded, somewhat distracted by his culinary creation. "Sure, Mom. Can Diana try my pancakes too? She said she's never had bananas Foster anything." "Of course." Breakfast passed in a blur for Shanice, though Marcus seemed to enjoy every moment, especially when Diana pronounced his pancakes worthy of a 5-star restaurant. Josephine watched her daughter with concerned eyes, having been briefed on Williams's television appearance while Marcus was cooking. Finally, when Marcus had finished eating, Shanice led him to a quiet corner of the villa's garden. They sat together on a stone bench overlooking a small koi pond. "Marcus," she began carefully, "do you remember Aaliyah Williams, the little girl I operated on last year who had the special heart surgery?" Marcus nodded. "The one who could play soccer again after you fixed her heart. You showed me a picture of her with her soccer team." "That's right. Well, Aaliyah's father is very angry with me right now. He thinks I didn't do a good job with Aaliyah's surgery, even though many doctors have said that I did everything correctly." Marcus frowned. "But why would he be mad if you helped Aaliyah play soccer again?" "Sometimes adults have complicated feelings, honey, and sometimes they express those feelings in ways that aren't very nice." Shanice hesitated. "Mr. Williams has been saying some untrue things about me on television, and he's also talked about you." "About me?" Marcus looked confused. "But I never met him." "He found out about you giving your airplane seat to Ms. Eliza and about the documentary we're making. He doesn't like that people might see our family in a positive way." Marcus considered this, his young face serious. "Is that why all the security people are here? Because Mr. Williams is saying mean things?" "Partly," Shanice admitted, not wanting to frighten him with the full truth about the threats. "We just want to make sure everyone stays safe while grown-ups sort out these disagreements." "Is Aaliyah okay? Did I do something wrong by giving up my seat?" "No, sweetie. Aaliyah is doing fine with her soccer and school, and you did something wonderful by giving up your seat, something kind and generous that many adults wouldn't even do." Shanice hugged her son close. "I'm so proud of you for that, and nothing Mr. Williams says can change how special that moment was." Marcus seemed relieved but still thoughtful. "If Mr. Williams is mad because his daughter was sick, maybe he's just sad and scared, like how Tyler gets really angry at school when he's actually feeling sad about something else." Once again, Shanice was struck by her son's emotional intelligence and empathy. Even in this situation, he was trying to understand the perspective of someone behaving poorly toward his family. "That's very wise, Marcus. Grown-ups do sometimes express sadness or fear as anger." She stroked his hair gently. "But even when people are sad or scared, they still need to be responsible for their actions. Like how Ms. Robinson says we can feel our feelings, but we can't let them make us hurt others." "Exactly like that." Marcus nodded, seemingly satisfied with this framework for understanding the situation. "Can I still be in the documentary to show people about being kind on airplanes?" "If you want to, yes, but only the parts you feel comfortable with. and if you change your mind at any point, that's completely okay. I want to do it, Marcus said decisively. Maybe if Mr. Williams sees it, he'll feel better too. Shanice fought back tears at her son's unshakable belief in the power of kindness, even directed toward those who wished him harm. Maybe he will, honey. Now, why don't you go see if Grandma is ready for her morning walk? I think she was hoping you'd tell her more about those frogs you found. As Marcus ran off to find his grandmother, Shanice remained on the bench, gathering her composure. Her son's resilience and natural goodness strengthened her resolve. Williams could attack her professional reputation, could even threaten their safety, but he could never diminish the fundamental decency that defined her family. The rest of the day was a whirlwind of activity. Filming continued for the documentary, with Marcus sharing stories about his school's kindness initiative where students earned kindness coins for helpful actions. Josephine recounted family history, including how Shanice's father had established one of Chicago's first mentoring programs for Black youth interested in science and medicine. Meanwhile, the media landscape was shifting. Williams's GMA appearance had initially generated sympathy and outrage, but as Shanice's measured response circulated, public opinion began to divide. Medical professionals rallied to her defense, questioning Williams's claims about hidden evidence of negligence. By late afternoon, an unexpected ally emerged. Dr. Helen Cavanaugh, the chief of pediatric cardiology who had supervised Aaliyah's surgery, issued a statement to the press. As the supervising physician during Aaliyah Williams's procedure, I can categorically state that Dr. Shanice Thompson performed with exemplary skill and judgment. The complication that occurred was a known risk of this complex procedure, was promptly addressed using established protocols, and resulted in no lasting harm to the patient. Mr. Williams's allegations of negligence and cover-up are unfounded, and, in my professional opinion, motivated by factors unrelated to the actual medical care his daughter received. This professional validation from a respected white female physician effectively neutralized Williams's insinuations about diversity considerations influencing the hospital's review process. By evening, Vanessa had secured a temporary restraining order against Williams, prohibiting him from publishing or distributing surveillance photos of Marcus, or making further public statements alleging unproven negligence pending a full hearing. The atmosphere at the villa that night was one of cautious optimism. While enjoying dinner on the terrace, Eliza shared positive feedback from network executives who had viewed the documentary's rough cuts. They're blown away by the authenticity, she told Shanice. Especially Marcus's interviews. One exec said, and I quote, "In a media landscape of manufactured emotion, this kid's genuine goodness cuts through like a laser beam." Marcus, overhearing this as he returned from getting seconds of pasta, looked puzzled. What does that mean? Eliza laughed. It means people can tell you're the real deal, Marcus, that you're not pretending to be nice for the cameras, you're actually nice all the time. Oh, Marcus considered this. Well, yeah, being mean is too much work. It's easier to just be nice. The adults exchanged amused glances at this simple wisdom. As Marcus returned to his seat, Diana discreetly approached Shanice and whispered, "We've detected unusual activity at the property's northern boundary. Jackson is investigating, but you might want to move everyone indoors soon." Alarm flashed through Shanice, but she maintained a calm expression, not wanting to frighten Marcus. "Dessert in the living room, everyone?" she suggested lightly. "I think there's that chocolate cake left from yesterday." The security team smoothly escorted everyone inside while maintaining an atmosphere of normalcy. Once Marcus was settled in the living room with cake and a board game with his grandmother, Diana briefed the adults in the kitchen. It appears Williams hired local teenagers to stake out the property. They were taking photos with long-range lenses, presumably trying to get shots that make it look like you're living in luxury while avoiding accountability. Local teenagers, Eliza repeated aghast. He's involving uninvolved minors now. Our team intercepted them without incident. They admitted Williams's security team paid them $500 each for the photos. We've contacted their parents who were unaware of the arrangement. Diana's expression darkened. Williams is getting desperate, employing increasingly reckless tactics. Desperate people are dangerous, Josephine observed quietly. We need to be prepared for escalation. Later that night, after Marcus had been tucked into bed, Shanice found herself unable to sleep. The thought of Williams targeting them through local teenagers, potentially putting those kids in legal jeopardy, was deeply disturbing. How far was he willing to go? She wandered downstairs to the kitchen for tea, finding Matthew already there, reviewing security footage on a tablet. Can't sleep either, he asked sympathetically, putting the tablet aside. Too much on my mind, Shanice admitted, filling the kettle. This was supposed to be a relaxing visit to help my mother recover from surgery. Now we're in the middle of some bizarre vendetta, using my son's simple act of kindness as a shield against a powerful man's rage. Matthew nodded thoughtfully. When Eliza first told me about meeting you and Marcus on that flight, I was struck by how a chance encounter, one seat on one airplane, could create such a meaningful connection. Now that connection has become a lifeline for both our families. What do you mean? Eliza never told you why that documentary series means so much to her, did she? When Shanice shook her head, Matthew continued. 3 years ago, Eliza was at her lowest point professionally. A major network had just canceled her investigative series on corporate malfeasance after pressure from advertisers. She nearly left the industry altogether. He poured hot water into mugs as he spoke. But then she witnessed a small act of kindness in a coffee shop. A homeless man returned a lost wallet to a businessman who had earlier refused to give him spare change. That moment restored her faith in humanity and inspired this new project focused on everyday heroes. The network executives weren't convinced it would find an audience, he added. Until Marcus's story came along, now they're fully on board and Eliza has creative control again. He smiled warmly. So you see, your son didn't just give up a seat, he gave my wife back her voice as a filmmaker. This perspective shift helped Shanna see their situation in a new light. Yes, Williams's vendetta had created danger and stress, but it had also revealed the strength of their community, the power of their family's values, and the unexpected connections that arose from simple kindness. As they sipped their tea in companionable silence, Shanice's phone buzzed with a notification. It was a news alert from the Chicago Tribune. Victor Williams under investigation for business fraud, sources say. She opened the article quickly, reading that federal investigators had reportedly been looking into Williams's real estate dealings for months, with allegations of tax evasion, bribery of city officials, and misappropriation of investor funds. His attacks on you might be a distraction tactic, Matthew observed after reading the article, creating a public narrative of himself as a grieving, wronged father to generate sympathy before these allegations broke. Using his own daughter as a shield, Shanice realized with disgust, while accusing me of doing the same with Marcus. The next morning brought more developments. Vanessa called early to report that Aaliyah's mother, Cynthia Williams, had reached out through her personal attorney, requesting a confidential meeting with Shanice. She says it's about Aaliyah's well-being, Vanessa explained, and she's willing to come to you without Victor's knowledge. After careful consideration and enhanced security arrangements, Shanice agreed to the meeting. That afternoon, Cynthia Williams arrived at the villa, a nervous, elegant woman with perfectly coiffed blonde hair and designer clothing that couldn't hide her evident exhaustion. They met in the villa's study, with Jackson discreetly positioned nearby and Vanessa joining via secure video link. Thank you for seeing me, Dr. Thompson, Cynthia began, her voice tight with anxiety. What I'm about to share puts me at considerable risk, but I can't stand by any longer while Victor uses our daughter as a weapon in his vendetta against you. Shanice nodded encouragingly but remained silent, giving Cynthia space to continue. First, I want you to know that Aaliyah is doing wonderfully, Cynthia said, her expression softening momentarily. Thanks to your surgical skill, she's back to playing soccer and has more energy than ever. The complications during recovery were frightening, but your team's quick response prevented any lasting damage. I'm relieved to hear that, Shanice responded sincerely. Aaliyah's well-being has always been my primary concern. Cynthia took a deep breath, twisting her diamond wedding ring nervously. Victor's claims about negligence are fabricated. There is no hidden evidence. He's manufactured this entire crusade because, she hesitated, because he's terrified of what federal investigators are about to uncover about his business dealings. The fraud investigation, Shanice murmured. Yes, it's much worse than what's been reported. Cynthia's voice dropped to a whisper. He's been moving money through offshore accounts for years. When he learned of the investigation 6 months ago, he became obsessed with creating distractions, establishing himself as a sympathetic figure in the public eye. Your successful surgery on Aaliyah provided the perfect opportunity. She pulled a USB drive from her purse. This contains financial records Victor doesn't know I have access to. It also has recordings of him discussing plans to discredit you by any means necessary. Her hand trembled as she placed it on the desk. I can't let him continue this, not when he's threatening a child. Shanice was momentarily speechless. Why are you doing this, Cynthia? You're putting yourself at risk. Tears filled Cynthia's eyes. Because I learned about Amara last month, Victor's first wife, Aaliyah's birth mother. You didn't know? Shanice asked gently. He told me she abandoned them, wanted nothing to do with Aaliyah. Cynthia's voice cracked. I found letters, dozens of them, that she'd written to Aaliyah over the years. Letters Victor intercepted and hid. She fought desperately to maintain a relationship with her daughter until the day she died. Cynthia looked directly at Shanice, her gaze unwavering despite her tears. When I confronted him, he threatened to take Aaliyah away from me too, claiming I wasn't her real mother. That's when I realized he views people, even family, as possessions to be controlled or discarded. She straightened in her chair, composing herself. I've spoken with divorce attorneys. Once this situation with you is resolved, Aaliyah and I are leaving. I've already begun documenting his emotional abuse. What can we do to help? Shanice asked, deeply moved by Cynthia's courage. Use the evidence I've provided, but please keep my involvement confidential until Aaliyah and I are safely away from him. Cynthia glanced at her watch anxiously. Victor thinks I'm at a spa retreat. I should go before he becomes suspicious. After Cynthia departed, Shanice gathered with Eliza, Vanessa, and Jackson to review the materials she had provided. The evidence was damning, clear documentation of Williams fabricating claims against Shanice and conspiring to threaten her family, all to distract from his own legal troubles. This changes everything, Vanessa declared. We can turn this over to the FBI agents investigating his financial crimes and add witness intimidation and harassment charges. What about Cynthia and Aaliyah's safety? Shanice asked, concerned. We'll coordinate with her attorneys, Vanessa assured her. Ensure they're protected when this becomes public. The group worked late into the night, developing a strategy that would end Williams's threats while minimizing public spectacle that might affect Marcus or Aaliyah. By morning, they had a plan. Rather than a public confrontation, Vanessa arranged a private meeting with Williams and his attorneys, attended by FBI agents, Shanice's legal team, and representatives from the hospital. When presented with the evidence Cynthia had provided, along with documentation of his surveillance and threats against Marcus, Williams's swagger crumbled. The meeting concluded with Williams signing a comprehensive agreement, a public retraction of all allegations against Shanice, a substantial donation to a children's cardiac care foundation in Aaliyah's name, and his commitment to cease all contact with the Thompson family. In exchange, Shanice agreed not to pursue additional legal action for his harassment and threats. What Williams didn't know was that the FBI had already obtained warrants based on the financial evidence Cynthia provided. As he left the meeting believing he'd minimized the damage, agents were already seizing documents from his offices and homes. By that evening, breaking news announced Victor Williams's arrest on multiple federal charges including wire fraud, tax evasion, and witness intimidation. Cynthia and Aaliyah, prepared in advance, were safely ensconced in a private location with security protection. At the Napa Villa, Marcus watched the news coverage with confusion. Is that the man who was saying mean things about you, Mom? Yes, honey, Shanice replied carefully. But we don't need to worry about him anymore. The important thing is that Aaliyah is safe and doing well after her surgery. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. I'm glad she can play soccer again. Maybe someday we could play together. I'm not very good, but I'm learning. Shanice hugged her son close, marveling at his ability to focus on connection rather than conflict. Maybe someday, she agreed. With the threat from Williams neutralized, the documentary production accelerated. The story had evolved beyond just Marcus's airplane gesture to encompass themes of integrity, justice, and the ripple effects of compassion. Eliza skillfully wove these elements together while keeping Marcus's original act of kindness at the emotional center. 2 months later, the Thompson family gathered with friends and supporters for a private screening of the completed documentary, titled First Class Heart: How a Child's Kindness Changed Lives. The film beautifully captured Marcus's spontaneous generosity and followed the unexpected connections and challenges that resulted. In a surprise development, Richard Blackwood had collaborated with the Pearson Media Group to establish a foundation promoting kindness initiatives in schools nationwide, inspired by Marcus's story. Even more surprisingly, the final sequence of the film featured Aaliyah Williams herself, now living with her mother in a new city, speaking about how Dr. Thompson had saved her life and enabled her to continue pursuing her dreams of becoming a professional soccer player. "Sometimes grown-ups forget what matters," Aaliyah said with the wisdom of a child who had endured difficult experiences. "But Dr. Thompson never forgot that I was the important one, not the arguments or the grown-up problems." The film ended with Marcus and Aaliyah meeting for the first time, initially shy but quickly bonding over their shared interests in soccer and space exploration. The final shot showed them sitting side by side, looking up at the night sky, their faces illuminated by starlight and possibility. As the credits rolled, there wasn't a dry eye in the screening room. Eliza, now holding her newborn daughter in her arms, approached Shanice with emotion. "We did it," she said softly. "We turned darkness into light." "Marcus did it," Shanice corrected gently, watching her son chatting animatedly with Aaliyah across the room. "By being exactly who he is." The documentary premiered nationally the following week to critical acclaim and massive viewership. Schools began incorporating it into character education programs. Airlines used it for customer service training. Most importantly, countless families reported watching it together and having meaningful conversations about compassion, integrity, and standing up for what's right. 6 months later, on another cross-country flight, a young girl gave up her seat to an elderly man using a cane. When asked why, she simply replied, "I saw Marcus do it in that movie. It made me feel good to help someone." One act of kindness, rippling outward, creating waves of change. The final twist came a year later, when Shanice received an unexpected letter postmarked from Nigeria. Inside was a photograph of a smiling woman in medical scrubs, Amara Ibrahim, M.D., standing beside a young girl who looked remarkably like Aaliyah. The accompanying note explained that Amara hadn't died in the car accident as reported. Facing Victor's relentless legal attacks and fearing for her safety, she had staged her death and returned to her family in Nigeria, heartbroken at losing connection with her daughter, but believing it was the only way to escape Williams's control. Having seen the documentary and learning of Williams's downfall, Amara had cautiously reached out to Cynthia. To everyone's surprise, Cynthia had responded with openness, recognizing that Aaliyah deserved to know her birth mother. The two women had formed an unexpected alliance, determined to give Aaliyah the extended family support neither of them had enjoyed. The photograph showed Aaliyah's first visit to Nigeria, meeting her maternal grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins. Amara's note expressed profound gratitude to Shanice, not just for saving her daughter's life through surgery, but for being part of the chain of events that eventually reunited them. At the bottom of the letter was a postscript in Aaliyah's handwriting. "Dr. Thompson, thank you for fixing my heart, and please tell Marcus his kindness helped fix our family." Shanice showed the letter to Marcus as they sat on their Chicago apartment balcony watching the sunset. "Wow," Marcus said after reading it, "so Aaliyah has 2 moms now." "Yes, and they both love her very much." Marcus thought about this. "That's even better than having 1 mom, even though you're the best mom ever," he added hastily, making Shanice laugh. "Do you know what I think is amazing?" Shanice asked, putting her arm around her son. "What?" "That everything that happened. Aaliyah finding her birth mother, the documentary helping so many people, even Mr. Blackwood's foundation. All of it started because you gave up your airplane seat to someone who needed it more than you did." Marcus shrugged, still fundamentally unchanged by the attention his story had received. It was just the right thing to do. As twilight deepened into night, Shanice looked at her extraordinary, ordinary son and felt overwhelming gratitude. In a world that often seemed dominated by people like Victor Williams, powerful, ruthless, concerned only with their own interests, Marcus represented something infinitely more powerful: the unassuming courage to be kind without calculation or expectation. His first-class seat had been given freely, but what he possessed, a first-class heart, was something no one could ever take away. And as stars appeared in the darkening sky, Shanice knew with certainty that this heart would continue to light the way forward, not just for her son, but for all those fortunate enough to be touched by his simple, profound goodness. Did you enjoy this story of ambition, courage, and the power of one voice to spark change? Let us know in the comments. What part resonated with you the most, or which character's journey surprised you? We love hearing your thoughts. And if you want more stories like this, full of twists, heart, and inspiration, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. There's plenty more where this came from, and we'd love for you to be part of this journey.